Welcome, everybody. I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go over our very first point of today is training. We have a training that we're working on currently and want to get out to you soon. Is everybody able to see that screen? Excellent, excellent. So this is the old Veterans Direct Caller simulation. It's on the Network Resource Center. So if you are in the Call Specialist Resource dropdown, you go to Trainings and then Training, go to Veteran Direct Caller Simulation. We're going to be updating that by the beginning of this year. What we'll be doing initially is focusing on the safety assessment. So when you play the direct veteran caller simulation, you're going to very specifically focus on the safety assessment portion. And then we will be releasing probably by February, sometime early in 2021, a full call with safety planning also involved. So again, we're going to the Call Specialist Resource tab, Training, and Veterans Direct Caller Simulation. And if you don't have your access to the Network Resource Center, you can always email info@lifeline.org. Hopefully I got that right, and maybe one of my colleagues can put that into the chat for me. The next, any comments, questions, thoughts on the simulations? Have people been using we've got the third-party caller had been just recently updated, and we also had the direct caller simulation recently updated. So these will be in line with those trainings. Sure if we've got any questions or comments on that. Excellent. I'll move to the next one. The next thing that we're working on will be available early, hopefully in 2021. It is the safety assessment video specific to veteran callers. So when you are on the Network Resource Center, to get to the safety assessment piece, you're doing Call Specialist Resources again. This time it's under practice guidelines, and go to safety assessment. At the bottom of safety assessment, you can go to the actual safety assessment site. And that looks like this, safety.networkresourcecenter.org. This is just the intro video of the safety assessment. Hopefully this design looks familiar to folks that you've been watching these safety assessment videos. We are adding a specific video that will focus on veteran needs. It will ask a lot of the questions that the Tier 2 centers are asking for the Veterans Amendment. So it'll be great to get that in there so that everybody gets an opportunity to practice with that also. So again, that was through the Network Resource Center under Call Specialist Resources. Your practice guidelines, go down to safety assessment, and then you'll be able to find the information to go directly to the site on this link here. Excellent. Any questions on that one before I move on to my next announcement? Great. So our first set of data for the new fiscal year will be due at the beginning of January. I know that's a challenging time for data. There's so much to do. But if you can get that in ASAP, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm actually going to add the link for the Google form in chat, but first I want to go through it for folks that are new, and then just also because we updated to Google Forms this last data collection quarter, so it might be new to some of you. So hopefully you can all still see that I've got a Google form pulled up. You're going to start by just simply entering your email address, and then you have to choose the quarter of the report that you're currently reporting on. So I'll leave in the old quarters in case something happened that you weren't able to complete it by the due date. You'll still have the opportunity to. So that's the pro of that. But the con is then you have to choose the correct one. So my plan is each quarter I'll just add the most recent quarter to the top of the drop down list. So note that for the data that we're collecting currently and will be turning in on January, you'll choose quarter one for fiscal year 21, October 1st through December 31st, 2020. Then you'll also choose from the drop down the call center that you're working in. So I'm just going to go with Georgia. You need to choose if you're tier 1 or tier 2. Choosing tier 2, which we all are, will bring up some additional questions that tier 1 doesn't answer. It might self-populate your name, town, and state, but if it doesn't, go ahead and throw those in there. And then your actual questions start. So did your center meet with your local suicide prevention coordinator this quarter? Just as a reminder, that's required to happen once a year, but you could obviously do it multiple quarters. And if you do, go ahead and mark it each quarter that you do. How many warm transfers were completed to the Veterans Crisis Line this quarter? So that's going to be a number. How many times did the caller indicate they did not press 1 for the following reasons? Let's say there were 10 times that you were unaware. You don't have to answer, put zeros in the ones that are zeros, but you certainly can if it helps you feel like you've really completed. So we've got all of our drop downs there. Move on to the next page, and this is where it's going to ask the number of calls from or about active military or veteran that you received on the Lifeline, and then also on your local or other crisis lines. So those two answers there. Once you hit submit, you'll get a confirmation note email for the email address that you provided saying that you have completed your data. I think that's been working pretty well for us. See quickly if I can steal this again and put it in. It's not going to let me copy it actually, only because I'm on live right now. More, where's my chat? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to the chat. Here we are. Here is that link to be able to provide your data in the Google form. Note, that's not going to change. We're going to continue to use that same link. So if it's easy for you to put that in a calendar reminder at the beginning of each new quarter, you'll have it there. But I will always send out those email reminders saying that it's time to go ahead and get that data in. Hearing that there were, we're just making sure that if you're not chatting, that you've got yourself on mute. So that's great. It looks like everybody's on mute now. So just note that I will send out that reminder at the end of each quarter. I'll also probably put a reminder on the Facebook group. So that's a great place just to get general information. I'm doing my best to kind of keep a very specific distribution list of those of you that are in tier 2, but it's always nice just to kind of get that general note out there via Facebook in case somebody's position has changed. There's maybe a lot of that going on currently with changes in location, and if you're gone remote, and if you're changing your capacity and such things. So making sure that I get that out there that way also. Any questions about things we've covered so far? Kate's got things going in the chat and making sure she's got information in there. Perfect. So what do we know from last year? Last year, we had about 107 centers that fully participated for the full year. 57 of those centers were tier 2. So over half were collecting that additional information. And we had completed surveys depending on a center closing, a center temporarily not taking Lifeline calls, things along those lines. Each quarter, we received at least 96 completed surveys. And then there were the 2 quarters where things were, I don't know how, but somewhat normal enough for 107 of the 107 centers to actually turn in their data. So kudos to those tier 1 and 2 tier centers that through it all, we're still able to collect that data and get it into me. That's really great. So I know that could be challenging with moving to remote status, with maybe not taking Lifeline calls temporarily. And like I said, unfortunately, we may have lost a center here or there that had to close due to funding and such. So how many veteran calls to the Lifeline did we find? So specific on the Lifeline phone number, people not pressing 1, the 2 tiers of centers, the 107 centers reported 22,000 calls for the year that were from veterans. That's about 1,800 per month. One of the centers that is probably on the line today, Real Crisis Intervention in North Carolina, reported that the highest number for veteran callers reaching them on the Lifeline at over 3,000 calls. Real Crisis Intervention is in North Carolina. So that's got a high military population, but they're also a backup center for the network. So it makes sense that maybe they're getting just a higher call volume in general. Let's see, Tracy or Nadine, either of you want to say hi or talk at all about your experience with that high call volume of veteran callers?
Hi, this is Nadine. Thank you for having us on today. Real Crisis used to be a backup center for the Veterans Crisis Line as well. So we were very familiar working with veterans. And like you said, North Carolina has a high population. We have 11 bases in North Carolina, which one of them being one of the largest in the country, Fort Bragg. So on our local Lifeline, we do see a lot of veteran calls, and about 44% from our local Lifeline are regular callers that need that additional support, if it's daily or weekly, that are veterans.
Oh, that's great information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Nadine. We also want to look at how many calls on other lines, not the Lifelines, but the other lines that are reaching us. Oh, hold on. I got Cynthia ready to maybe say a word, but I want to say one more thing before I move on. I want to talk about the idea of, so we had that 22,000 calls last year of veteran callers that chose to talk to the Lifeline instead of pressing 1. So I wanted to point out the top 3 reasons why it was reported that veterans did not press 1. And it was, the first 2 are basically a tie. Each quarter it flipped back and forth. Unaware it was an option. So a lot of veterans are telling us, oh, I didn't realize it was an option. The next one, like I said, pretty much tie, flipping back and forth. They say, I didn't want to be connected to the VA. So those are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum of, oh, I didn't realize versus, oh, I really didn't want to talk to the VA. Kind of pointing to the fact that it's really important to let people know that it exists, but they might not want to use the service. The third top one was they felt it was unrelated to their veteran status. So whatever was going on that led them to reach out, they're like, this is not really all that veteran related. In which case, I'm just going to talk to the Lifeline. I don't need to talk to the Veterans Crisis Line. We also had a strong showing in the other category and heard from other meetings that one of the reasons that may be happening on a quite regular basis is that people get appointment reminder cards maybe through their local VA, and that possibly the press 1 portion is not prominently displayed. So while the phone number they're supposed to call for their appointment is on there, the Veterans Crisis Line phone number is also on there. And people are maybe calling the Veterans Crisis Line because they didn't get through quickly on the other line, or they just didn't see that the other line was listed. Are centers still seeing that? Are centers seeing that frequently enough that it makes sense to add that as a category for reasons why there was no pressing 1? be good information to collect if it seems like it's happening pretty frequently. And I'll let you either unmute and chat about that, or if you just want to throw it into the chat box on if it seems to be happening frequently enough at your center that it makes sense to try to track it that specifically. All right, well, that's what I wanted to cover while we were still talking about those Lifeline calls, before I moved on to announce that Lines for Life in Oregon was the highest number of calls on other lines. They have their own Oregon-based 24/7 military crisis line in addition to the other lines that they're answering, and being the contingency center for the Veterans Crisis Line. So overall, for the whole network, all 107 centers that signed on to the amendment, we had like 80,000 calls reported on other lines that were veteran related. That averages about 6,500 per month. Of those almost 80,000, Lines for Life was 26,000 of those. So Lines for Life, kudos. Would you like to say anything about your experience? I see both Cynthia and Greg have joined us. Thank you.
Yeah, just that. So we have had, in Oregon, we run the military helpline, which is funded by the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs here in Oregon. And we've been operating that line, I think, longer than the VCL has been around, actually. So, so that's where a lot of those calls come in. And then, of course, we're the backup center to the National Veterans Crisis Line. So, so we definitely, working with veterans is and has very much been in the fabric of our work at Lines for Life. It's an integral part of our training because we do get so many calls from veterans, both locally in Oregon and across the country. So yeah, it's a big part of our mission.
Amazing work, thank you. Another bit of information that we collected was warm transfers to the Veterans Crisis Line. So we had 1,800 warm transfers reported by you, the tier 2 centers. So of the 57 centers, that's what we got. We don't collect that from tier 1 centers. So just being clear that that's just from about half of the centers reporting that are in the Veterans Amendment. So I just wanted to ask, I know we kind of anticipated that those numbers might go up simply as a function of your reporting on it. You've got a reminder in your data collection of, did you offer to transfer to the Veterans Crisis Line? Did they accept that? So it hasn't really gone up. I know we've talked in the past that some of that was technology, potentially. Many people moving remote, it wasn't as easy to do the warm transfer handoff. Are folks still experiencing that as a challenge? Can unmute or go ahead and throw things into chat. All right, some of you may be chatting, but I'm going to go ahead and do a follow-up question right away. So in the process of offering a warm transfer, have you found that there's a good time to offer a transfer to the Veterans Crisis Line that makes it more likely that the person is going to accept? Are you doing it somewhat early on once you realize that you're talking to a veteran? Are you waiting until you've started a safety plan and you're thinking that this could be part of their safety plan steps? Where is the best time to offer a warm transfer to get that person connected with Veterans Affairs so that they can get those services where they're going to say, yeah, I would love a warm transfer? It depends on the conversation. Yes, it absolutely does. Like there's times when you know you can just do it right away, or there's times where you know you can absolutely wait till the end. And then there's other times like, well, this just seems awkward throughout. I don't really know when to do it. And I think quite frequently you might find out early on and it feels comfortable, like, oh, we've hardly talked, and I know this person's safe and I can get them over to the Veterans Crisis Line, or we've talked about a lot and I'm going to offer it at the end. But that middle point seems a little awkward. Like, I've talked to you for quite a while, we're halfway through your story. Would you like to talk to someone else instead? Can be definitely challenging. So mostly very early on is a response from Meryl. Kimberly saying normally we offer once we establish the veteran safety. Yes, very important to make sure that there are no safety concerns before transferring over. Excellent. But it's sounding like from the two people that have provided the information that earlier is usually better than later. Excellent. Thank you. Feel free to go ahead and continue throwing information in the chat about that if anything pops into your mind. So the other piece that I want to ask about that is, I have so many follow-up questions about warm transfers. When people decide that they would rather not be warm transferred, are we getting any clear information from callers, anecdotally or however we might be collecting that information, about why they're saying no thank you to the warm transfer? Again, feel free to unmute or just throw information into the chat. And again, either anecdotally or if you happen to be collecting it, which would be great, do you know the frequency in which people are accepting or declining those warm transfers? Because all we're really asking for you to report on is how many warm transfers actually happened. That doesn't mean that you're not offering more. Oh, and Kimberly's saying, yes, they have the data points to capture that. Generally, they're saying maybe that, hey, just wanted the lifeline, didn't really need the Veterans Crisis Line. So those are maybe coming from those folks that didn't press 1 because they didn't want to be connected to the VA. That makes sense. All right, well, feel free to keep that conversation going with Kate in the chat, and I'm going to move on to the suicide prevention coordinators. So while it's only required once a year to have that meeting, and that meeting can be via Zoom, via phone call, if you're lucky enough to have some situation in which you can do it in person, that's great. While it's only required once a year, we found that on average, 24 centers per quarter met with their suicide prevention coordinator. So that's really great. The idea that folks didn't do just, oh, I'm going to have one meeting and be done. I also know there were some challenges, that there weren't necessarily easy connections to be made with suicide prevention coordinators in your community. If you experience that and are still trying to figure out how to get connected, please let me know and we'll see if we can do anything about that. If you're new and don't know who your suicide prevention coordinator is yet, I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat also, so that you know how to find your suicide prevention coordinator. Again, those are staff of the VA that specifically work to help get military individuals connected to VA services. So you having a relationship with that suicide prevention coordinator could have some benefit to the callers in your area. Instead of me talking about what the benefits might be, I'm just gonna ask you to either throw into the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know if you've seen any positive benefits of being able to spend a little bit of time getting to know your suicide prevention coordinator in your area. Meryl's commenting with their relationship. They're on the Mayor's Challenge together, co-trained together, forming a partnership with the VA. It is a bit more challenging. I know, Meryl, you and I were able to talk about some of the great things that you've got going on. They give you a huge pat on the back, like you're working hard to make sure that relationship is solid.
I just would say it's a very large bureaucracy. So we try to work out a partnership where we would cross refer, do some specific things around follow-up. And that's just been more challenging because of the layers of bureaucracy at the VA. But we get along with the suicide prevention coordinator very well. We have a close relationship.
Excellent. And I see also training for interns, volunteers. Oh, and a question, does anyone have tips on what to discuss with the local VA suicide coordinator? Any meaningful talking points or suggestions? And I'm going to, here's the link.
I think for the SPCs, one thing is that, you know, the name, the title, suicide prevention coordinator, can be off-putting, but really it's the front door for veterans to get connected to a variety of different services, whether it be vocational services or health or, you know, homelessness. So they're not just about, you know, people who are suicidal, but it's hard to convey that sometimes. So maybe ask them for tips of how to describe what their role is and how they can help them.
So then I also want to open up the floor for discussion. If there's anything we have as centers who have been doing tier 2 now for a year, that would be helpful tips for any of the centers that just started back in October, only been collecting this data for a couple months. Anything that has been helpful as far as asking the question about veteran status, asking about pressing 1, offering the warm transfers, just any general tips or guidelines that the new centers might find helpful? Okay, how about just questions from folks that have been in tier 2? Any questions or any comments on how things are going? Any additional support you need from Kate and I?
I'm just going to pop back in because somebody mentioned that they plan on talking to their local SPC about how COVID has impacted things. And I think that's a fantastic topic. I've heard a number of stories about, you know, the local services, the people that assist veterans are remote or, you know, have shut down. And so to know that and know what you're referring to And if they're open and how they're operating is really, that's a great idea.
Excellent. Thank you for catching that and sharing that with the whole group.
And in particular, I know a lot of the veteran service organizations assist veterans for free with filling out paperwork. And that has been a huge problem for veterans in COVID, not being able to get that assistance.
Well, I know you all have it, but I'm going to, just in case, throw my email in again so that you can follow up with me if you have any questions, comments. Yeah, definitely access in general, very challenging this year. I thank you for all taking time to be here with us today. Anybody have any last questions, comments? We thank you for taking the time to gather this information, get it to Kate and I so that we can work with the VA so they know what's going on with callers that are not reaching out to them directly, or who maybe are reaching out to them directly and also using the local lifeline at the same time. Yes, happy holidays to all of you. Hope that you are all safe and well, and we will meet again next quarter. Send out a date once we have one determined. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.